Hi friends! A short message before we start the episode. Every time we meet a new scientist, we love to chat with him or her over a good coffee or tea. So if you like the show and want to support our work, here are 2 ways to do it. The first one is to go on our page Buy Me a Coffee by following the link in the show notes and to offer us a coffee. Simple, effective, and we won't forget to thank you. The second way is just as simple. Just share your opinion about the episode on Twitter by tagging us at Lonely Pipette. We won't miss to answer you. Thanks again for the sharing and à bientôt!
The Pixar formula is something like the following. Once upon a time, there was blank. Every day, blank. One day, blank. Because of that, blank. Because of that, blank. Until finally, blank. Now, Pixar knows a thing or two about storytelling. So do not deviate from this script. If you can fit your science into this, like literally just sit there and answer these questions. You know, they all come in with their presentations. And then I'm like, okay, put it aside. And I want you to fill in the blanks here so that you can really understand what the key points are that set up the story of your work.
Are you working in research, trying to do the best science you can?
Are you a team leader, a research assistant, postdoc, PhD student, or any other type of scientist?
Are you looking for a place where you can sit, relax, and listen to inspiring people?
Well, we have good news for you. You've just found what you're looking for.
Hi everybody, my name is Renaud Pourpre.
And I am Jonathan Weitzman.
Welcome to the Lonely Pipette,
helping scientists
do better science.
My name is Arjun Raj. I'm a professor of bioengineering and genetics at the University of Pennsylvania, and I feel honored to share my tips with the Lonely Pipette.
Arjun Raj studied mathematics and physics at the University of California, Berkeley, followed by a PhD at the Courant Institute at New York University. He was drawn into biology and during his postdoc at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he's never looked back. Since 2010, he's been a professor of bioengineering at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. His lab aims to develop a quantitative picture of cell function at the single cell level, and they combine quantitative tools, molecular biology, and mathematical modeling to arrive at a quantitative understanding of how processes operate in single cells. He was awarded the NIH Director's New Innovation Award in 2011 and the Edison Patent Award in 2018, and more recently the George Heimer Faculty Award for Excellence in Research. His blog, Random Musings from the Raj Lab for Systems Biology, has countless tips for academic life, including how to structure a talk, scientific publishing, and career development. Arjun, thanks for coming to share your tips with the Lonely Pipette.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Hello, Arjun. It's a pleasure, and this is also for us an honor to have you on the show. You said off recording that you had listened a little bit to our podcast, so you might have an idea where I'm going here with the first question, because this is always like the origin story. So let me ask you, what was the spark that ignited your passion for a career in science?
Yeah, I don't actually know what the spark was for a career in science, and that's because I think I've been interested in being a scientist basically since I can remember. So when I was growing up, my parents got this book, My Book About Me. And in it, as a little kid, you fill in, how many steps to my bedroom? 27 steps. And one of the questions is, what do you want to do when you grow up? And so the first time I did this, I was like 4 or 5, I wrote like truck driver. And then I did a revision. I guess I was already a scientist. So I was doing a revision of this book somehow a couple of years later. And I was looking at this book and somewhere I crossed out truck driver and wrote scientist. And So as far as I can recall, I've just been drawn to science. So I don't know what the spark was. It must have been something in the womb, or well, anyway, something between truck driver and scientist. But it's before I had really much conscious memory for it.
So we always ask our guests what they would have become if they hadn't become scientists. So I guess truck driver.
You have your answer, yeah.
Were there a reviewer that prompts your revision?
Good question. I mean, I think about that a lot with my kids is, how much is it parental influence?
Are they at the truck driver stage?
They are. Well, my oldest son is 17, and he's very interested in playing violin and all sorts of things like that, which has been an interesting journey and interesting to sort of compare the parallels. Youngest kid is a little over 1 year old. So,
the truck driver.
We'll see what the future brings.
Okay. Have you ever considered leaving science? Was there any time when you had doubts?
Not particularly, although I will say that when I was in college, I was in a rock band. And after college, we moved to New York for a year to try and make it as a rock band. I have to say, I'm just so happy that all of this happened before there was all this internet, YouTube, whatever. So all of this there is no documented evidence of me playing rock and roll music. Thank goodness.
What was the band called?
I can't even remember, honestly. It was, and we were so, well, anyway, that was a different era of life. I'm just very thankful there's no recorded evidence of this.
So after the truck driver and the rock star, you studied in mathematics. And so we wondered what drew you from mathematics and physics into biology?
Yeah, so, I had so my undergrad degree, I came into my undergrad really wanting to do theoretical physics. I was just really drawn to understanding principles of the universe and that sort of thing. Then when I was at Berkeley doing physics, they said, you should really consider, if you're interested in theoretical physics, you should consider doing like mathematics as well, because that's really integral in theoretical physics. So I took up a math degree and I found I really loved math. It was obviously so elegant and beautiful, in some ways more than physics. I think at some point I was like, I just don't know if I'm good enough at math to really, be a pure mathematician. And I got interested in applied math, actually. Of course, then I had this year-long stint in rock and roll. And then I applied to graduate school at the Courant Institute and was very fortunate to get in there actually off the wait list. And that was a place known for applied mathematics. I did something super applied. So I had a very odd path for a math PhD. I actually, my dad's an academic, not in this field, but he said, you should think about biomath. What's biomath? I don't even know what this is. But there was a very kind and very brilliant professor at Courant named Charlie Peskin, and I started working with him. Just a wonderful person. He also had a very interesting career path. He started as a medical student. And so I started working with him. And then one of his other students actually brought to me a couple of these interesting papers on stochastic gene expression. This was, early 2000s, including, these inspirational papers from Michael Elowitz and Alexander van Oudenarden. And I got really interested in this area of quantitative molecular biology. And I thought, okay, here is where a lot of excitement could be. There are a lot of interesting problems. I had no interest in ever working in a lab or being in a lab long term. I mean, I hated lab. I thought I hated lab as an undergraduate. It was my least favorite class. Jokes on me. Then I asked Charlie, what could I do to keep it real in in biology. Is there a lab I could work in? I actually, again, at the suggestion of my dad, he said, think about like a lab. And Charlie knew someone who ran a lab, this man named Fred Kramer, really wonderful guy, who is a really, kind, brilliant scientist, who ran a lab actually at this place called the Public Health Research Institute, which at the time was located in Newark. Actually, that institute no longer exists. It's been sort of folded into Rutgers in New Jersey. So I started working there for a summer after my first year of PhD. And I was working with Fred, but also with a co-PI in his lab, Sanjay Tyagi, who is just like a wonderful human being and scientist. And I was doing lab work. I was doing some thermodynamics of molecular beacons, whatever stuff, but I just really fell in love with it. And talking with other students there, I got entranced by this energy of molecular biology. It felt so alive and interesting to me. I had the opportunity to do my PhD there as part of my math degree, and somehow it all worked out. And I have to say, I'm really grateful to my advisors and to the Courant Institute for allowing me to do it, was probably the weirdest PhD on record at Courant, for a mathematician to essentially be doing all this lab work. But many of the things I learned then, I think, have fueled my entire career. And then things were a little more standard. So I did a postdoc at MIT with Alexander van Oudenarden, and then got a position in bioengineering at University of Pennsylvania, as you said, in 2010, and been doing whatever it is we're doing ever since.
So you, on your blog, I think we saw somewhere that you compare biology and physics. What do you think each of these fields can learn from each other? So you went from one into the other.
Yeah, physics has a deep tradition of quantitative study, which I think is an amazing thing about physics, and the precision and explanatory power. It's really remarkable. That is the story of the 20th century, really. It's incredible. Like, they can predict where the moon will be in 200 years, that kind of thing. It's really amazing. Biology in many ways has been very stubbornly resistant to quantitative methods for a variety of reasons. I think the primary one being, just the data was just not quantitative for a long time. We just didn't have the tool. Yeah. There's another aspect to it, though, which is that, and I think this is something that took root in the early 20th century, and we're seeing the consequences of it more and more, is that biology is very fundamentally about, it's a very empirical area because it's so complex. It's a complex system, and when you have really complicated systems, they're not necessarily amenable to the sorts of analyses that people do in physics. And I think that's actually a profound shift in the way science operates in the last, a shift that started maybe 100 years ago, and that is coming to fruition now. And it's something difficult to grapple with, to be honest.
So biology has a lot to learn to sort of catch up with the quantitative precision of physics. Do you think physics has anything to learn from biology?
Yeah, there's, I think, a strain of physicists who are very interested in bringing biological ideas into physics, or how can we use this to reinvigorate a lot of physics. I don't know. I don't know whether that mapping will ever really work, because I think physics is, in many ways, physics defines out all the things that are complicated as not physics anymore. And I think that is a very fundamental way of thinking about physics that may make it difficult to make these connections. I think actually physics training is in the other direction. I think physics training is very useful in biology, but one of the things that for me took a long time to learn is the idea of controls in biology, because in physics, I've seen it many times when people from physics come to biology and they have a really hard time understanding that you need to do controls. And again, this comes from the idea of complexity. If you don't have a lot of complexity, you can actually understand what's happening. You can model it, and you don't necessarily need to do controls because you have a pretty solid understanding of what's happening. Whereas in biology, we need to do controls because strange things happen all the time for reasons we don't understand. And that's why you need to do it. And I think that's actually a very difficult thing for physicists to grapple with. The other thing with physics training, at least in my opinion, is that it's taught very much in this way of like, here are the great ideas, and you learn them and you learn to solve problems with them. But you don't learn much about how people came up with those ideas. How do you actually establish a definitional framework that then you use to create the models of our world? And I think that's one of the big challenges that honestly is very difficult for people coming from physics into biology. And I would say it's difficult for biologists too, is how do you even establish a framework for what you're understanding? And I feel like that is a lesson that, has taken me a long time to learn. I think I'm starting to appreciate it to some extent and have an appreciation for definitions in biology.
That's funny because it reminded me a discussion I had with a friend who holds a PhD in astrophysics. So basically, we were discussing our areas of research, and while I was having this methodology of trying to test my topic to define the rules to create a model, he was trying to see in which case his models was not applying to the world. So it was different way of applying research. I was trying to create a model while he was trying to challenge the model he has in physics to see if they need to rearrange it to make it more coherent with the reality. So I don't know, it reminded me of that because I have the feeling that somehow the approach we have of a problem can be also a different angle.
I think it's very, very different. I mean, I think, physicists spend a lot of their time looking for models with small numbers of variables that then reveal some sort of a principle. Whereas I think the biological approach is let's find the molecules that control behavior using, in many ways, I think the paradigms that we got from, the 80s and so forth, like here's a gene, here's a mutation, it causes this phenotype, and, that's our story. And I think one of the challenges that we face is, a lot of that low-hanging fruit has been plucked already. And hence the need for things like systems biology. And so they're sort of different strains of it. The strain that I was really interested in was the form of systems biology where it was much more of a mapping of kind of physics-like thinking. So here's a small number of principles, variables. Can we think of it, the analogy that, however flawed it may be, was that of a circuit. Can we bring sort of circuit principles into biology? The other flavor of systems biology was let's just measure everything and sort it out on the back end.
Yes.
And I would say that, the market is generally spoken and the latter is won out. Whether that's right or wrong, not for me to decide. But, we're definitely swimming in data now, data that I think is fascinating. It's amazing. I mean, it's like science fiction. What you can do now is compared to 5-10 years ago, the amount of data, the quality of data, it's changing so fast. But we can measure 10,000 more genes than we could. Are we getting 10,000 times as much knowledge? No. So.
Yeah. I agree. But don't tell the funders. Yeah.
Is this thing live?
So to make sense of all this data, do you keep some mentoring advice from your mentor? How do they have influenced you the way you work now?
Yeah, I think that, everybody should be using, to whatever extent possible, these tools. It's amazing what we can do now. One of the things that I really drew from my mentors, especially Sanjay was just a brilliant, creative experimentalist. He would just have these ideas that were so clever, so out of the box. And I really carried that with me. I try and carry it with me now. So, we can make all these amazing measurements. What I like to, instill in my trainees is, okay, we can make the measurement, but what is the clever thing that we can do with these new tools combined with, for instance, a really clever experimental design that might reveal something deeper about the system? And those are the sorts of things that I really find interesting, and that and there are a lot of questions out there about whether creativity is something that can be trained. Is it something innate? Is there some special genius to it? And I think actually creativity is very much a trainable thing. And a lot of it just comes down to, do you have the energy to actually keep thinking and keep pushing yourself to try something more interesting or think about something more interesting?
So my students who are listening, we have a big question with them. How do you teach creativity?
Yeah. Wow.
So you said you think it's trainable. How, as a teacher, how do we do that?
I mean, that's a really good question. I can't claim to know exactly how to teach creativity. I think if I try and think, where did I learn some creative things? I think it's keeping a keen eye out for the tricks that people use that are really clever and elegant. And like Sanjay had a number of clever tricks up his sleeve. And I just try and remember those and think like, oh, what could we do in this situation? And I think there's...
Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So, Sanjay had this really clever idea. This is from my PhD paper where, we were trying to, something about transcriptional bursting and co-bursting versus uncorrelated bursting. And he just had this really clever idea that basically turned an artifact on its head. It was saying, okay, well, if we do leplification, we get the genes integrating together. Rather than treating that as a burden, let's take advantage of it. And so we can actually put these two different colored genes together and use that to actually show now with these two independent colors that something is happening here with these genes bursting together. It was just a super clever experiment. I'm not doing it justice. And this is just one example of many different things that Sanjay had taught me essentially by osmosis. And I think what I try and do in my lab, at least, is, share with people all the different ideas that I have. And then also, I think a big part of it is the rigorous evaluation of those ideas and saying, okay, yeah, that sounds cute, but is it really going to teach us something? What's the next step from that? And that's another big part, I think, of mentoring people in their scientific process, is making sure that they have the tools to carefully evaluate what they do and ensure that the ideas they pursue are the ones that are the most promising. Not that anybody has a crystal ball, but I do think over time you can get better at that part of it.
That's great. So I've came across another article of your blog. Sorry, we read you before to prepare this, but that was super interesting because you had really nice even title of article, because I found one that was called "I Need a Coach." I don't know if you remember this, but you were talking about how to navigate with the fact that there is a point where everybody gives you a bunch of conflicting advice, and that's you needed a way to. How do you choose between all those different conflicting advice? Can you tell us more about that? Like, did you find a coach? Did you find your solution? How?
I didn't actually find a coach, so I didn't take my own advice, unfortunately. I probably should. I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to become my own inner coach. And a lot of that is, I think actually just in general with mentoring, I think it's all very well-meaning. It's the sort of prescription these days to all of academia's ills is let's, mentor it until we fix this problem. What I've found is that, we're very uneven in how we apply mentoring. I think a lot of it is very low-value mentoring. And I think that if we spend some time thinking about how to make mentoring better, we would all be very well served. It would be much more efficient for time. I think it would be less stressful for trainees. For myself, actually, one of the things that I try and do for myself that in lieu of a coach is to say, okay, here is something I want to achieve. I want to, write this paper faster. I want to do this better. I want to do that better. Everybody has those thoughts in their head all the time. I need to get better at this or do better at that. The real trick is, how do you reduce that to practice? And what I found is that behavior change is a lot easier to do with concrete rules, and the principles come later. The problem is that as mentors, we give the principles, but without the rules. So the trainees are kind of like, okay, well, here's some abstract, like how to choose a project thing, but like, I don't know how to apply that yet. I haven't, just give me the rules. It's like when you teach arithmetic, first learn your times tables, then we can talk about multiplication in the abstract. But you have to have some basis for it. So I try and do this in my mentoring, is like, okay, look, where are the specific places where we can come up with some strategies that will help you put this into practice?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I think that would really transform how we do a lot of mentoring in labs for junior faculty, just in general across the board. But I think we have a lot of low value mentoring out there.
Okay.
So if we can get really practical, because I do like the idea of practical tips. What if you can offer? So your practical tips for the mentors is, don't give generalities. Try and give precise like actions. Like, can you explain a bit better?
I'll give you an example.
Give us an example. Yeah.
So one of the things that most PIs do is give their trainees some exposure to peer review. So you get a paper to review, and then you ask a trainee, would you like to review this paper with me and write up your thoughts about it? And, we'll work this up and send it back to the journal. And it's a useful part of their training. How do you critically evaluate other people's work in a, constructive way? The problem, the challenge that I faced early was, I would say, okay, here's a paper. Why don't you review it? Write up your review. And these are my principles for how I review a paper. And I think I have a blog post like how to review a paper, and it's filled with these kind of general principles. And I'd get write-ups from people in my lab, and they weren't good. They weren't what I would submit to the journal myself by any means. So what I thought was like, look, these are really smart people. It's not that they aren't doing a good job of this because they're not capable. It's just that they haven't seen specifically how I want it to be written or how I think it should be done. So what I did then is I took reviews that I had written and I gave it to them and I annotated it. And I said, okay, look, this part of the review, this is what I say here. I say, this is my summary of the paper, and this is the degree of detail I go into. Then my next paragraph, I have an overall assessment of the paper, is the quality up to standard, and what's the impact in the field, whatever those things might be. And again, here's an example and here's an annotation. And then here are examples of, major points, minor points, however you want to do it. And, this is too much detail. This is fine. This is, be sure to be specific here, exactly what you want from the author to do. And immediately, I was getting practically submittable reviews from my trainees because now they had a model to work from. So I feel like this is an example where giving very specific advice really helps. I have a document I shared, words to avoid when writing, because, again, I think writing is another situation where we often give trainees these very broad pronouncements like, you should be clear and don't be unclear. I mean, this is like not actionable stuff. What I found is that there were actually key words that people would use as crutches to basically not think about things or explain themselves clearly. So I gave a list of those words, and here's an example of why that word is bad, and here's an example of how to improve it. And I feel like that's been helpful for my lab. I mean, it's because it's not like a principle. It's like find and replace. You just go through and you learn and you see. And I've had people from my lab say, oh, now I understand why I shouldn't use that word. But I think you have to get the repetitions in before you can understand the principle.
Yeah, then it's like the tables. Like you need to repeat to get the process and maybe tweak it into your own. But
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
So thank you. That's super interesting way of seeing it, and I think we never had that in the podcast, so that's great.
Okay.
There is another thing really interesting, again, sorry, from your blog. It's because you share also about science communication, scientific presentation. I'm going to ask a tough question in a way that is quite general, but then we can go into more detail.
Yeah.
It's like if you had to give your favorite piece of advice from your blog around science communication, what would it be?
Oh, yeah, that is a tough question. I mean, let's see if I can summarize a bunch of nonsense into something coherent. So I would say all right, give me a second here. Let me think.
Yeah, you can take your time.
I would say if I were to give, again, something concrete as a way to think about scientific communication, one of my blog posts somewhere, I found this quote from Pixar, or the Pixar storytelling arc. And basically, for every Pixar movie, they have to be able to fill in the blanks in the following statement. It's something like, hang on, let me just... Okay, so it's something like the following statement. Once upon a time, there was blank. Every day, blank. Every day, blank. So the Pixar formula is something like the following. Once upon a time, there was blank. Every day, blank. One day, blank. Because of that, blank. Because of that, blank. Until finally, blank. Now, Pixar knows a thing or two about storytelling. So do not deviate from this script. If you can fit your science into this, like literally just sit there and answer these questions. So I do a workshop on how to give a talk. And, they all come in with their presentations. And then I'm like, okay, put it aside. And I want you to fill in the blanks here so that you can really understand what the key points are that set up the story of your work. And one of the things I've found is that you can think of communication, scientific communication, as having two functions. One is to actually communicate your work with clarity. But the other one that I think people ignore a lot is that you want to inspire your audience. If you think back on great talks that you've been to, you probably can't even remember the content. All that you remember is that it was really inspiring and kind of blew your mind. I feel like, of course, some part of that is the science you do. But I think a lot of people can get to the point where they're really clear with what they're saying, but they don't really fill in this narrative arc. They don't set up what the problem was, why this is interesting, and leave the audience with that feeling of wonder at the end of it, of like, wow, this really changed how I think about things. And in order to do that, you have to remind people of the state of the field. Once upon a time, there was blank. Every day, blank. One day, blank, right? That's the setup. And I feel like, it's very easy to miss.
Yeah. So we're laughing because the Lonely Pipette also does communication workshops now, and we have a workshop on storytelling where we talk about Kurt Vonnegut's The Shape of a Story, and Chekhov's gun, the idea of planting things that you then use later. So we agree entirely. And if anyone wants a Lonely Pipette workshop on storytelling in science, you know where to find us. So, but you go more specific in your blog. I found an example where you talk about the Star Wars character, the Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you say that the presenters like him and that the audience is the hero. So, can you tell us more what you mean about the call to adventure?
Yeah, so actually, this is all really well laid out in this wonderful book called Resonate by Nancy Duarte. I strongly recommend listeners
so I quote
check
her
out this
in
book.
my,
Yeah. There's all these parts to stories, and one of them is resisting the call to action. So there's this part where Obi-Wan says, Luke, you should use the Force and fight the Empire. And, Luke, oh my God, like Star Wars is so bad. I mean, I love Star Wars. Bad. So Luke Skywalker, he's like, it's not like I like the Empire. I hate them. But what can I do about it? It's like, that's like resisting the call. And then you have to somehow overcome that. So your audience is going to feel a resistance to your call to action. Like, what if we thought about cells as individuals rather than bulk populations? And they're going to be like, oh, whatever, who needs single cells? That's kind of like they're resisting the call, and you're going to have to pull them over the hump. And usually you do that with a bit of evidence. So when you give a science talk, you have to, and this is usually 5 to 10 minutes in, that you have to give them something, a piece of data or something to say, something's going to happen here. If you look in Star Wars, right at that same time, there's this part where Luke Skywalker uses the Force and can do some kind of laser blasty, whatever thing. That's so effective because it's right at this point where you're like, should I believe this nonsense? And the answer is yes. Like, look at this. Like, here's a little piece of data, a glimmer of data of what is to come. And I feel like that's a really important principle in giving a scientific talk.
That's great.
That's great. We never got we never got the whole of Star Wars played out before.
No, but that's great because you have a mental image that projects that is easily also. I mean, on the other side, I can really see how the comparison helps you to remember and maybe put it in practice later for your own presentation. And
when I do these workshops, when I do these workshops with students, I often have them practice the contrast. Like, give a slide that shows where the field is at, and now what will be different with what you did? How is that going to shape things and change things?
So do you have a resource that people could look at? It's scattered through your blog, and
it's a little scattered, and I've meant to make like a short video showing some examples of before and after of how to improve a talk and do this in a short form, for the TikTok generation. But I do have a long form video on how, my talk on how to give a talk. I'm happy to share it with people if they're interested. It's not my best talk on how to give a talk, so I'm a little more reluctant to share it, but don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. But it's great because this example about how to apply storytelling in your scientific presentation, I think you just exemplify also the previous concepts you were explaining before, like get practical, give people example they can rely on, and just not say, do storytelling and it would work. Because each time also I'm talking with other science communicator that wants to raise as professional or researchers that come to me in workshops to say, how can I apply and do a better science communication? They always say, people tell me storytelling, but storytelling is like it's a thematic. It's not an advice. It's just you need to get more precise and practical about that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, but I also feel that however formulaic you get in your advice, you need to experiment and see what works for you, right?
I think that's definitely true. I mean, a lot of this thinking about how to give a talk came from, I used to teach this systems biology graduate course, and at the end of the class, the students had to give a presentation. And the presentations were not great at first. So then I said, okay, let me give this talk on how to give a talk and give them, some maxims or prescriptions, whatever it might be. And the talks were still not great. And I was like, okay, what we really need to do is practice. So I made a structured group work. So at this point, I'm like wasting half the class on how to give a talk. But there was a structured group work where I led them through how to work with each other to give the feedback and implement the feedback. And then the talk quality increased dramatically. So I think in the end, a lot of it is exactly as you say, you just have to try and improve. And sometimes you learn more by doing than by thinking. And I think this is a really good example of that. Just try. I myself, after all of this, I had to prepare a talk recently, and it was like not great. Got a lot of feedback and iterated, and hopefully it got better.
And this is the guy who teaches people how to give a talk.
That's the worst thing about giving a talk about how to give a talk.
I know.
Is that everyone's then
We all come
scrutinizing
from
your
that.
talk, and it's like, oh man, I really better not screw up here. So
Yeah. Okay, that's been great, Arjun. I think we got everything from big principles to real practical advice. We're going to take a break, and after the break, we're going to come back and hear more about Arjun out of the lab.
Hey folks, don't run away. You're listening to The Lonely Pipette with Renaud Pourpre and Jonathan Weissman, where our goal is to help scientists do better science.
If you're enjoying the show and you want to learn more, you can follow us on Twitter at Lonely Pipette, and please share the podcast with your friends.
If you don't want to miss any of our future episodes, you can subscribe to our mailing list and join our community. Click on the subscription link on our Twitter account.
It's as simple as that. Take a few moments to get more tips from the Lonely Pipette. So welcome back. You're listening to The Lonely Pipette. I guess you know that because you've been listening for half an hour. But anyway, you're listening to The Lonely Pipette, and we're talking to Arjun Raj today. So Arjun, you've told us about all these things you do, and you're giving lectures about how to give a better lecture, and also running the lab and the quantitative. But how do you have some morning routine? How does this busy day start for Arjun Raj?
yeah, morning routine is good question. So my morning routine, usually I wake up pretty early most of the time, kind of fluctuates.
What does early mean? Because some people early means 5 and some people early means before noon. Yeah.
Usually 5-ish, I would say.
Wow.
And it depends on who else is waking up at what time and whatnot. But, I heard this thing about, fasting, that you're supposed to only eat within a 12-hour window. So I try and wait until 6 o'clock to eat. And then I eat a bowl of Life cereal. That's my routine. Been doing that for like 40 years, embarrassingly enough. And then, deal with various kid things, whatnot. Sometimes I'm driving my kids around to school. Sometimes on the way back from their school, I'll actually do a mentoring phone call with some random lucky person or unlucky person on the internet. Come back and then, I head into work and see what the day has for me, which seems to be varied. Every single day seems to be different than the last one.
Do you have a wind down schedule at the end of the day? Or is it just
down schedule
managing all the
day.
Kids?
I mean, I'll often, a lot of it is kind of dealing with various children and their various issues. I think I like to wind down, watch a little bit of TV or movies. Actually, I generally prefer to watch movies. I watch a lot of action movies. So somehow I find that relaxing. I don't know why. And then, at some point pass out, hit repeat.
Perfect. What's the most adventurous thing you think you ever done? And if you get one, would you do it again?
What
and
is
why?
the most adventurous thing I've ever done? That's a good question. I don't consider myself actually particularly adventurous. I'm not sure, which is making me feel like I wasted my life.
No, actually, that's the concept, is to see how sometimes you can just remark stuff that you have done in your life or can be considered as something.
Yeah, I mean, I had this like rock and roll stint, and I remember actually I went to India around that time, and my family in India, here in America, you get chance after chance after chance. I mean, you screw up 10 times, here's your 11th chance. In India, you're lucky if you get one chance. And I remember telling my family in India, I'm going to be in a rock band. And they're like, oh my God, what's he doing? How recover from this? And, was it, I don't know. I don't know that I can look back on things. I feel like there's a time scale at which point is something a mistake. It's hard to say. It just kind of is. Like, I ordered the wrong thing at the restaurant. Okay, that's a mistake. But if it's like I spend a year of my life doing something, it is part of my life. So I don't know that I can say I regret it or don't regret it. It just, there it is.
Oh, that's nice. I like it. The fact that, well, you have done for a while, you cannot, I mean, don't regret it. That's part of your book now.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite failure now? Is there a certain failure in your life that you kind of learned from it and that you want to share? I mean, we always learn from failure, but do you have a favorite one?
Interesting. Yeah. What are some of my biggest failures in life? Hang on, let me think about this. I had some notes. Maybe I wrote something about this. Yeah, that's okay. So what are some of my biggest failures? I think there are some projects. So scientifically, I would say that there are some times when we've had ideas. I'd like to think they're ahead of our time. Maybe that's just wishful thinking. But, something that just kind of didn't quite work out the way that I had hoped. Sometimes maybe the technology is not there. Maybe it was just a flawed concept to begin with. And, I think actually one of the beautiful things about academia is that typically you can still publish it. So that's, I think, a good thing, actually, that, the idea should be out there, even if maybe it didn't quite work out. And then at least it's documented that something, worked out this way or didn't work out this way. But at least it's there. And I think that's actually kind of a beautiful thing about academia, that we have that freedom.
How do you help students and postdocs in your lab when they come, they feel that they're not getting anywhere, or that it hasn't worked, or they've been wasting their time?
That's a really great question. And I think the answer is very multifaceted. I think there are times when a trainee comes in and something's not working, and it means something needs to change. And maybe that's the project itself. And I think actually in academia, oftentimes we kind of keep pushing things beyond what's reasonable. And but, sometimes people keep plugging at things and it turns out great. So I think, different people have different ways of doing these things. I think I tend to have a bit of a shorter fuse on pulling the plug on things.
Do you like to recruit people from mathematics and physics? Is that where you like to recruit, or not necessarily?
I mean, I love having a mix of people in the lab. I think the lab functions best when it's a team of people that each bring their own expertise. So you get different viewpoints from all the different people in lab. I mean, I'm just one member of this team, and ideally we have people with all kinds of different strengths, different bases of knowledge. So, I'm happy to take talented people from basically any place and put them together, and good things will come out.
Okay, moving towards the end, we have a series of quick fire questions. They work or they don't work. Let's see how we go. So if you could have, and we keep trying different combinations. So if you could have dinner with one or two people, living or dead, who would they be? Like, and why? Like famous people from history, or maybe not. Maybe your grandmother, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, if I were going to have dinner with one person that I've never met, or let's say two people, it would be my mom's parents, who I never met.
Wow.
My mom's father died when she was very young, and her mother died when I was like 1 year old. And my mom is a wonderful woman and storyteller, and is always telling me things about her parents. And I wish I knew them. And so I would have dinner with them.
Where did they live? Where did
they lived in India. Okay. And it's I would love to meet them.
Wonderful.
Perfect. Another question now. If you had $100 million to spend in science, but not in experiments, how would you spend them?
Oh, wow. $100 million.
Tough question again.
Would I just give out a bunch of R01s? That seems uninteresting. What would I do with $100 million? I would find some people who I wanted to give freedom to, and I would give them as much freedom as possible. And so what that means is, hire them some administrative assistants who are really good to help them take care of all the grunt work, release them from funding constant pressure for a few years at least. And I don't even think it costs that much to do. But to give at least some scientists the freedom to really spread their wings and pursue excellence. I think that's what I would do.
So do you feel that you've been constrained by the system? I could hear you're sending a message to the administrators at Penn to improve the quality of administration.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that, I've been very happy at Penn, and I think they support
generally, do you think the system is constraining, and that if there was more
academia,
money,
I think in general, academia is suffering from burden. I would say a lot of that is administrative, meaning that we are required, just the number of forms I need to fill out feels like it gets more and more and more. And even little things like setting up a seminar, like I used to go give a talk and I just plug in my computer, hope it worked, and generally it did. And then I just go, now it's like set up this Zoom and that Zoom and put on this microphone this way and that way. And it's just like everything feels much more, it has a lot more friction than it did even 5 years ago.
We tend to complexify things, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's, there are reasons for it, but at some point it just takes a little bit of the joy out of doing things. And I think another thing is that scientific funding, I think there's a push towards having people have smaller labs, and I think, that's fine. But at some point, we need to, I think, support scientists at a level where they feel like they have some freedom to really spend time on the people in the lab and and the science and doing what they're good at. And I fear a little bit that science has become overburdened. I think PIs and professors have increasing scope creep in their professional obligations that at some point...
creep, what does that mean?
Yeah, scope creep, meaning just the number of things that a PI is supposed to be good at has just increased a lot. Sure. And, at some point it's just unreasonable to expect people to be good at all these different things. And that creates a lot of pressure and a lot of burnout. And, if I had $100 million, I'd try and make a dent in that to whatever extent possible.
Okay, great. Now a question, the other end of the scale. Can you think of a purchase of less than $100 that has impacted your life?
Less than $100.
Or 50 if you prefer.
Well, getting this microphone really helped for the podcast, so that's one thing.
That was a great purchase. My microphone was one of my best purchases. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I mean, if you'll permit me to bump up the price range a bit, I would say the AirPods are like, it's a little thing. I was like, there's some headphones, but I feel like I use them a lot and I miss them if I don't have them.
Okay.
And that was surprising to me.
It's amazing because you get very attached to them.
Very attached.
Recently in a storm, I got off the tramway and there was a lot of rain and it fell from my ear and it went in between the tracks in the rain.
No.
And I got so upset about this stupid little thing. And 2 days later, when it dried out, I came back and I found it and it was all completely destroyed. And effectively, it's hard to live without them. Sounds silly, right?
Yeah, so, it's surprising.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you think? Do you have a sentence written on your door? And if you don't, what would it be? Like
I actually do have a sentence written on my door. Hang on.
So great.
So for our viewers, he's just left the seat.
So the sentence written on my door is, Arjun Raj, laboratory for why some cells look different than others, distinguished professor of ordering takeout lunches. But if I was going to put a sentence on there as like tip for trainees,
you or someone else?
That came from someone else, but I think pretty accurately reflects things. If I were going to put a tip sentence on the door, it would be turn it off and then turn it back on again.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Nice.
You can. Okay,
Nice.
so ending up. So in terms of tips, What advice would you give to yourself if you met yourself 20 years ago?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I think the typical thing that people would go back and tell themselves to do is just chill out. Like, don't worry, don't sweat all the little stuff. But I was thinking about that.
But that's too general, right? That's too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, don't sweat over the details. But I feel like in everyone's development, you have to have a period where you really care about the details, where you cut your teeth on a problem scientifically or just even in life, where you care about all the little things. And that, I think, really shapes who we are. And it's important to have that attention to detail. I think it's only later that you say, which ones of these matter or not. But I think until you actually do it, you just don't know. And so actually, I think the only thing I'd say is you'll still be alive in 15 years. That's probably as specific as I could get.
Okay.
Great. So thank you. We are going to wrap up this episode. It was really nice to have this whole time with you. Where can people find out more about you and your work?
You can check my lab website. You can check my blog, which sadly I don't update as often as I should. You can find me on Twitter. I always tweet some kind of nonsense on there from time to time. So feel free to follow along.
So we first came across you on X or Twitter, and that's where the idea of having you as a guest. I know you've been very generous in sharing advice and tips on the blog and on X or Twitter, and we heard that if anyone wants mentoring advice that we haven't covered here, they can reach out to you, I guess, through any of these channels and get something more personalized feedback, right?
Absolutely. So I've done probably well over 100 of these mentoring calls. I found them very fascinating and eye-opening from people around the world at all stages, from undergrads to tenured professors. Just send me an email. You should be able to find it on my website. And yeah, happy to set up a time to chat.
Fantastic. Arjun, this has been great. Thank you very much for giving us so much for your time and sharing everything. And I'm glad you didn't become a truck driver. So thanks very much for your time, and thank you for your tips.
So that's it for this episode. Thank you for joining us at The Lonely Pipette.
We hope that you learned something new, that something resonated with your own experiences, or that you just enjoyed the science.
Let us know your thoughts on Twitter at Lonely Pipette, and please share it with your friends in the lab. If you want to join our community, you can subscribe to the Lonely Pipette mailing list or mail us by following the link available on our Twitter profile. You will receive the next episodes directly in your mailbox. How cool is that?
Stay tuned for the next show, and remember, you might feel like a lonely pipette, but it doesn't mean you're alone. Tips from the Lonely Pipette can help you to do better science.
À bientôt!
À bientôt!